Hey everybody, it's playoff time. Games start on Wednesday, so it's time to do my predictions. I'm gonna predict throughout the entire playoffs, all the way down to the Cup winner. Um, I wish I had a whiteboard for this, but I don't, so I'm just gonna do it on a piece of paper. I got the matchups in a little makeshift bracket here. Um, Last year, I believe I got 3 of the 8 first round series correct, so this video is probably going to be just for you all to laugh at me as I get most of these wrong. If you watched my season predictions video, I got a lot wrong there too, so I just seem to get predictions wrong. So take what I say with a grain of salt. I'm not going to go in detail into the matchups. This is just going to be predictions. I'll preview the series in videos that will be coming later today. I'll go more in depth into the series and look closer at both teams and stuff. This I'm just gonna predict and give a quick reason why. So yeah, I usually get these wrong, so just laugh at me all you want. By the Stanley Cup in June, you'll probably look back at this and go, "Wow, he was awful, wrong about everything." But let's see. New year, new things can happen. You never know. Let's see. Let's see what's going to happen. So let's start with the West. I usually start with the East in my videos. Let's switch it up today. Start with the West. Nashville, Colorado. Colorado is a great story getting into the playoffs this year. And obviously Nashville, President's Trophy winner, went to the Cup Finals last year. Colorado is just plain overmatched in this matchup, so Nashville's going to win this. I'm going to say 5 games. I'll put a number of games in parentheses. Oh, I did that wrong already. Yeah, ignore that. I put it on the wrong spot. Nashville in 5 games. Colorado, great season for them. Good to see them go from a last-place team to the playoffs. Nathan MacKinnon has had an MVP type season. I hope he wins the MVP. I know Taylor Hall has a really strong case too. So do a couple other players, Claude Giroux, Nikita Kucherov, guys like that. But Nashville's just too much. Nashville wins in 5. Winnipeg and Minnesota. This, I think, is going to be a very close, tight series. Very good series. Injury problems on both sides. Minnesota losing Ryan Suter is really tough. That takes a big chunk. He's their rock on defense. That takes a big chunk of their defense core importance out. So I'm going to say Winnipeg in that series. Probably in 6 or 7 games. I'm going to say that Minnesota has enough to take it to 7. So I think that's going to be a 7-game series, and Winnipeg gets the win, meaning that they will face Nashville in the second round. Pacific Division side of the bracket now. Vegas and LA. Vegas, brand new team in the NHL. Ridiculous season. Incredible that they even made the playoffs. Everything has gone right for them so far this year. But the playoffs are a whole new ballgame. Totally different style of hockey. Totally different pressure. Totally different atmosphere. Everything is just different when the playoffs come around. LA, veteran team with an elite goaltender in Jonathan Quick. I think this is a long series, but I think Vegas's inexperience hurts them, and I think the veteran experienced team comes through in this series, meaning the LA Kings will defeat the Vegas Golden Knights. I'm going to say that game goes 6, or that series goes 6 games. Vegas will definitely win a couple games, but I think the Kings end up taking it. And the final series on the west side, Anaheim versus San Jose. You could not have 2 more evenly matched teams than Anaheim and San Jose, except you kind of do on the other side with Washington and Columbus. But Anaheim and San Jose, this is going to be an incredibly close series. I'm calling it right now 7 games. No matter who wins 7 games, that's it's so close. One bounce this way or one bounce that way could change that whole series. This is a series that I could see coming down to overtime in Game 7. That's how close these teams are. In the end, I think Anaheim takes it. They've been really strong the second half of the season. They've struggled with injuries a lot in the first half, which is the reason they got off to such a lousy start. But they've really come on in the second half. And the Sharks, even though they went all the way to the Cup Finals a couple years ago, they do have a franchise history of choking in the playoffs. I think that hurts them superstition-wise, even if it doesn't actually hurt them. In my mind, it does. So I'm going to say Anaheim, meaning that Anaheim faces LA in the second round, which I think could end up being the best series in the entire playoffs because those teams hate each other. It's the best rivalry in the league right now, and I really hope they meet in the second round because that would be unbelievable hockey. I would watch every second of it. Over now to the eastern side over here. We've got Tampa Bay and New Jersey. Tampa Bay's not been playing their best hockey coming into the playoffs, but I don't think that means a whole lot. Again, everything resets at the start of the playoffs, so it's a clean slate. You're starting fresh. Tampa Bay has the better team than New Jersey. It's just the way it is. They have the better roster. So I'm going to say Tampa Bay in 5 games. So Tampa moves on. Next, Boston and Toronto. This, I think, is going to be an incredibly close series. Teams that are very, very similar. Boston is starting to get healthier. McAvoy and Chara have come back. Rick Nash should be good to go for the playoffs. Riley Nash should be getting there. So they're starting to get bodies back. They're just had an incredible season, much better than anyone really expected. They don't play Toronto that well, which is going to be tough. I think for Boston, for their first series could be their toughest until they get to the finals, if they get that far. They just don't. Toronto and Washington are two teams that Boston just doesn't do well against, and back in 2013, they beat Toronto. Toronto collapsed in the third period. They had a 4-1 lead in Game 7 with 10 minutes left. They collapsed and lost it 5-4 in overtime. Any Bruins fan remembers that series like it was yesterday. Toronto, another team that their recent history isn't good. They always seem to choke when they shouldn't. I'm going to say Boston, but it's in Game 7, and I don't think it's going to be a complete choke job like 2013 was. I think Boston wins Game 7, not coming from behind for a 3-goal lead with 10 minutes left, but I think it does go 7 games, and Boston wins it in 7, and it's going to be a very close and very tight series. So that means Boston and Tampa Bay meet up in the second round. On now to Washington and Columbus. This series, I think, is as close as you can probably get in hockey. Washington probably has the better top-end players. Columbus is much, much deeper, both up front and on the back end. Columbus's back end is incredible. You look at their defense core, they have 8 legitimate NHL defensemen. That's in goaltending is a huge thing with this series as well. Is it Holtby or Grubauer for Washington? Grubauer's been the hot hand. Holtby's the franchise goalie. Does Holtby start, and then if it goes poorly, he gets pulled fairly quickly? Do they just ride the hot hand with Grubauer? How does that work out? Bobrovsky has a history of not being great in the playoffs, mostly because every time he's in the playoffs, he runs into Pittsburgh. So we'll see if it's a playoff thing or if it's a Pittsburgh thing with him. I think that this Columbus and Washington series is going to be very, very interesting. And it's the Caps. You all were probably waiting for me to say something like that. It's the Caps. Now, lately they've been going out in the second round, but it's the Caps. They're going to lose in the playoffs. It's just a matter of if it's the first round or the second round. And I'm going to continue to say that until they finally go deep into the playoffs. And I haven't seen it yet. So I'm going to take Columbus. Columbus in 6 games. Well, 6 or 7. 6 or 7. It would be very Capitals for Washington to blow Game 7 on home ice. I'm going to say it goes to 7 just for that, because that would be the most Capitals thing ever, would be to go in as a 1 seed in the playoffs and then lose in the first round blowing Game 7 on home ice. That would be very, very Capitals. So I'm switching that 6 to a 7. Columbus in 7, I think they take it. And the Capitals will capital once again this year. And finally, for the first round, Pittsburgh and Philly. I wanted this matchup really, really badly. I love when these two teams meet. Pittsburgh's not as good, I don't think, as they were the last couple of years when they won the Cup. But I still think they're better than Philly. Philly, I don't know if they can get enough secondary scoring, and goaltending is a huge question. And what's the most important thing in the NHL playoffs? Goaltending. Goaltending and depth are the two big things. Philly's got a big question mark in net. So I'm going to say Pittsburgh takes that in 6 games. So now we're on to the second round. Back out west, Nashville versus Winnipeg. This will be a fantastic series. But I see Nashville taking it. I think Nashville's the better team, and they're going to win it. That has probably 6 game series written on it, so I'll say that goes 6. Kings versus Ducks probably will be the best series of the playoffs. There's nothing like watching the Kings and Ducks play each other. They're always really close games when these teams meet up. That's why no matter who wins, it's going 7. And man, this is really tough one. This is a real tough one to call. I think I'm leaning towards the Kings because they have an advantage at the goaltender position. But my gut is telling me Anaheim because it's Anaheim and they're usually very good in the playoffs. They're a veteran team, but so are the Kings. This one's really difficult, but I'm going to say Anaheim. They always seem to get it done in the playoffs. I know they haven't won a cup since '07, but they're in the playoffs just about every year, and they always seem to make decent runs in the playoffs, whether it's to the conference finals or that's where they usually get knocked out, or sometimes in the second round, but they tend to be a strong playoff team. Then over to the East, Tampa Bay and Boston. Now, you're all going to say, I'm just going to tell you right now I'm picking Boston to win this, and I know that you're all going to say, oh, you're a Bruins fan, you're being biased, you just want the Bruins to win. Well, yes, I want the Bruins to win. I'm a Bruins fan, but I'm not picking Boston to win because I'm a Bruins fan. I'm picking Boston to win because Tampa Bay and Pittsburgh are two teams that Boston always does very well against. It's been like that for a while now with Tampa. They won when they met in the conference final back in 2011 when the Bruins went on to win the Cup. They beat Tampa Bay in the final, and really since then Boston has played Tampa really, really well. Tampa is just one of those teams that even when the Bruins aren't great like they were a few years ago and they were missing the playoffs, they still played Tampa really well, and it's just one of those teams. Tampa and Pittsburgh, Boston plays well against. Toronto and Washington, they do not. Lucky if they get past Toronto in the first round, which I have them squeaking by in 7, then I think Toronto will end up being their toughest series until the final. It's just the way, as someone who watches this team On a regular basis, they play well against Tampa and Pittsburgh. They don't play well against Toronto and Washington. It's just the way it is. I don't know why it's like that. I don't get it, but it's the way it's been for the last few years now. So I'm taking Boston in 7 over Tampa. And then down to Columbus and Pittsburgh. Now, this is where I think Columbus has their best chance to beat the Penguins. The last 2 times Columbus has been in the playoffs, they've played Pittsburgh in the first round and gotten knocked out. This Pittsburgh team is not as good as those Pittsburgh teams were, and this Columbus team is better than those Columbus teams were. I don't know if Pittsburgh could easily run out of gas. They've won 2 Stanley Cups in a row. They're going for their 3rd. They've played a ton of hockey over the last few years. The core is largely the same. I think this is going to be a much closer series than last year's 5 games first round matchup was, where Pittsburgh really just dismantled Columbus and made them look bad. I think this is a much closer series, but I'm still going to take the Penguins because it's Pittsburgh and they're extremely difficult to get out of the playoffs. So I'm going to say Pittsburgh wins it in 6, but it's a very close series, and Columbus will end up looking better than they have the last couple times they've been in the playoffs. So that brings us to our conference final matchups. We have Nashville and Anaheim again and out west, and now we have Pittsburgh and Boston in the east. So for Nashville and Anaheim, I think Anaheim, it runs out here. I have them getting by on being a veteran team and being strong playoff performers. I think you can only do so much at this point, and they made it to the conference finals again, but this time they're out. So Nashville goes to the Stanley Cup final again. I just think Nashville's the best team in the West. That's really you look at their roster, you look at the way that they've played, their goaltending. I just think they're at least a step ahead of every other team in the West. So I'll say Nashville wins that in 6 games. Anaheim puts up a fight, but their luck runs out at that point. And Nashville's back in the finals. So we have Pittsburgh and Boston in the East. Do we have a rematch of the Stanley Cup final from last year with Nashville and Pittsburgh, or does Boston take over? Again, people are gonna say that I'm biased, and this is a pick because I'm a Bruins fan, but I'm gonna take Boston this time in 7. And I'm not taking it because I'm a Bruins fan. I'm taking it because, much like Tampa Bay, Boston plays Pittsburgh well. And Boston swept Pittsburgh in 2013 right out of the playoffs in the conference final to go on and play Chicago in the finals, where they eventually lost. So I'm not picking Boston because I'm a Bruins fan. I'm picking Boston because their road just so happens to have them facing Tampa Bay and Pittsburgh, which are 2 teams that they play exceptionally well and tend to do well against and have, in recent history. Their toughest matchup is right there against Toronto, who they do not play well. If they can get by that, which remains to be seen, I have them squeaking by. I think it's Stanley Cup Finals for the Bruins. So that gives us a final of Nashville versus Boston. And Boston is no longer playing teams that they have a positive history against or play a lot. They're now playing a Western Conference team that is just flat out better than them. So my Stanley Cup champion for 2018, after making it to the playoffs last year and all the way to the Stanley Cup final and before losing to Pittsburgh, the Nashville Predators will win the Stanley Cup in 2018. I think they're the best team in the league. Barring any major injuries to someone like Pekka Rinne or one of their top 2 defensemen or something like that, I think they will handle their business. They have a great coach in Peter Laviolette. They're going to handle their business. They're going to beat Boston in 6 games in the Stanley Cup final, and be your Stanley Cup champions this year. The Nashville Predators are my pick. Boston, I think, has a chance to do some very good things in the future, but they will not win the Cup this year. They're not ready yet. A little too young. So, thank you very much for watching. Those are just my picks, and like I said, I'm usually dead wrong with stuff like this. So, feel free to laugh at me as much as you want, especially once the series gets started and you find out that I'm, in fact, very wrong about half of these. But thank you guys for watching. Like, comment, share, hit that subscribe button. More great hockey content to come throughout the playoffs and into the off season all year round. Follow on social media. Links are in the description. Check out the offthewallhockey.com. And I'll talk to you guys again very soon. Got previews of the Western and Eastern matchups coming up next. Thank you guys.